Solutions, using the first 3 steps to prep for Season 1. During my early college days, I studied the Alcoholics Anonymous 12 Steps program. I had learned that it was one of the longest-standing self-improvement systems, and I wanted to learn why. I have a great reverence for the originators of this program. They were truly inspired and have been a great service to so many people. Thank you to Dr. Bob Smith and Bill Wilson and all who have carried the torch of this flame since then. You should know that I almost quit studying it right off the bat because of the way the first step is phrased. On first read, it made me feel weak, when I was looking for something that would help me feel strong. But then I remembered an experience I had several times as a missionary in the Detroit area. Sometimes even English is a foreign language. In other words, maybe the words that are being used have a different meaning for them than they do for me. It never occurred to me that I might need a Urim and Thummim to translate Detroit English to Idaho, Utah English. This is a very common problem in marriages. Many couples don't even know they are speaking different languages, and I spend a lot of time being an interpreter. But that is not what I am addressing right now. Step 1. We admitted we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Oh, how I agonized over this one. My thirst for self-confidence, my delicate ego, my desperation to feel a sense of control at a time when I was feeling out of control. Why would they encourage me to come to the absolute opposite of what I was looking for? First, I scratched alcohol from the quote because that was not my issue. Then I challenged the 2 most disgusting words in the sentence, powerless and unmanageable. I was also studying the Old Testament at this time. I remember starting to see a pattern with the stories in the Old Testament. David versus Goliath, Moses versus Pharaoh, Gideon and his shrinking army, etc. A common theme was a small hero against a big enemy. Even the Joseph Smith story, 14-year-old versus the world, came to mind. Let's not forget Mormon, the boy leader of the Nephite military, and on the other end, Nephi, the young leader of his family and people. So maybe that is the lesson to be learned from step 1. Maybe the perspective needed is not an admission of weakness on my side of the equation, but an acknowledgement of the strength of my opponent. The following revision of step 1 has been a principle I have taught with great success for many years now. The new step 1. We admit that the enemy we are up against is more real and more formidable than we originally thought, and we will not be able to defeat him on our own. When applying this to repairing a marriage, each individual must come to this conclusion, not about their spouse, but about the dark entity who has invested his existence into destroying marriages and families, including yours. You married your spouse because you believe the 2 of you combined, synergized, could do many amazing things. Did you really think Satan would just sit by and let you become amazing? You have been warned time and time again at church. A common phrase I hear from my clients is, I knew Satan was smart and powerful, but I didn't know he could do that, referring to many of the things we are reading in this book. Step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. After getting step 1 to work for me, this step 2 was not very difficult, and would only need a tiny bit of tweaking. I had already become familiar with a power greater than myself while spending 2 years in Detroit. I had been raised by goodly parents, and entered my adult transition experience with what I now call an academic testimony. Things made sense to me. It took a lot more time and effort to actually meet God, though. See my book, Undeniable Communication with God, for details on that story. Another story from the Old Testament helped me solidify the use of step 2. It was another time when the hero was outnumbered. 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 14 through 17. Therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host, and they came by night and compassed the city about. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early, and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elisha prayed, and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. The new step 2. Remember, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Application. Don't let fear derail you from experiencing miracles. Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. This ties right into a core principle taught in the New Testament. John 17:3. And this is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. It has been my experience that the more a client or myself knows and remembers the personalities and capabilities of God and His Son, Jesus Christ, the less depression and anxiety they have as individuals, and the less fear they have about the death of their marriages. People often ask me, so now that you have assessed the condition of our marriage, what are the chances that it can be fixed? My response is usually something like, what are the chances that Lazarus can be raised from the dead? To have confidence in what God will and will not do, you have to get to know Him. But you don't have to know Him completely before He will start doing miracles on your behalf. I don't really have a revision for the actual words in step 3. I just have some recommendations for the perception and attitude of the reader. Each of us needs to be like unto the typical martial arts movie hero who turns his life over to his mentor in order to become a skilled hero himself. Not only do we need to become a student of the master, but it is wise to align ourselves with his army so his resources can help us win the ongoing war as we gain our own skills along the way. And as with any warrior who has enlisted in an army, sometimes for the best outcome, we just need to do what we are told instead of questioning everything. I am not suggesting to blindly follow a religion, but I am suggesting we faithfully and courageously follow God, and each day get to know Him better through direct conversations and reading about what He is capable of doing. The new step 3. Made a decision, renewed every day, to turn our will and our lives over to our mentor and military commander, God, as we increasingly grow to understand Him. Applying this to marriage. Stop doing it your way and submit yourself to a power and a method that will actually work. 3 vital ingredients provided by Joseph Smith Jr. Early in my career, way back in my early 20s, as I was passionately seeking out the secrets of healthy psychology, I came across some lectures by Joseph Smith Jr. The book Lectures on Faith is a record of some lectures Joseph Smith gave to the School of the Prophets shortly before he died. I found in Lecture the Third 3 vital ingredients needed for each individual to do his or her part in the marriage repair process. 2. Let us here observe that 3 things are necessary in order that any rational and intelligent being may exercise faith in God unto life and salvation. Most of the couples who come to me to fix their marriages are going to need a miracle. I have been asked, what percentage of the marriages that come to you actually recover? I respond with, it depends on the strength of the faith in God of both individuals. Do they both believe in the same God that was able to raise Lazarus from the dead? The stronger the faith, the more likely the miracle. 3. First, the idea that He, God, already exists. I often see a confused look on the faces of some of my clients when I bring this topic in a clinical setting. Unfortunately, it is not uncommon that people have accidentally created a separation between spirituality and real-life issues. Unfortunately, even dedicated religious people who have encouraged me to use gospel principles in the therapeutic process forget that including the awareness of God's participation in the process is a vital step. They have a tendency to either not look for ways to involve Him or accidentally push to not involve Him. 4. Secondly, a correct idea of His character, perfections, and attributes. To understand the application of this principle, I add a few more items to this list. For instance, His expectations of you, His hopes for your relationship, His capabilities of working with your spouse, His power to heal and raise relationships from the dead, His attention to detail, etc. 5. Thirdly, an actual knowledge that the course of life which He is pursuing is according to His will. One of the most common errors I see in couples is their tendency to be more aware of their partner's flaws than they are of their own. The scripture, Matthew chapter 7, verses 3 through 5, And why beholdest thou the mote in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, Let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. After an initial visit with the couple, where I have had a chance to observe the unfortunate patterns of interaction between the two, I will usually start to see them as individuals, alternating visits. I do this for several reasons. 1. I have found that people have a really hard time talking about their own flaws openly and honestly while the spouse is in the room. It can be embarrassing and or excessively vulnerable to do so. 2. I need to be able to be firm and direct with the feedback I give, and I don't want the other person to see me do that. 3. I have seen a pattern in individuals who pay more attention to what I ask the other person to fix than to what they are working to fix. As a servant of God, I hope I am asking people to make the same improvements that God would have them make. But usually, after an individual leaves my office, if they consult God, He will usually make a few adjustments to my suggestions. I hope the client will respond to him more than they respond to me. Unfortunately, God usually doesn't tell the spouse about the adjustments to the homework assignments. So the spouse can really cause problems if they say, "You aren't doing what Maurice told you to do," or the ever-famous, "Maurice said." I would like to remind people that my role in relationship repairs and individual therapy is more like that of John the Baptist than Jesus Christ. It is my job to help you get to the source of all power. Christ is actually the one that does the healing. So when there is a difference between my expectations and those of Christ and God, follow them, not me. In order to do your part of bringing about the miracle of marital recovery, it is your responsibility to check in with God at least once each day and ask, "Father, are you pleased with my efforts today? Is the course of life that I have pursued today according to your will?" If you feel the answer you are getting is a yes, then proceed with peace and confidence. If you feel you need to make some improvements, then I encourage you to dedicate all your efforts to your improvements and avoid watering down your energy by attending to your spouse's flaws. You will need to be as patient with your spouse's developments as you are asking them to be of yours. It is hoped that you can make your own improvements using reading, prayer, pondering, planning, and effort, but sometimes you will need professional training. You and God will have to decide when to involve someone like me. Quote, "For without an acquaintance with these three important facts, the faith of every rational being must be imperfect and unproductive. But with this understanding, it can become perfect and fruitful, abounding in righteousness, unto the praise and glory of God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ." Unquote. Joseph Smith, Lectures on Faith, Lecture the Third. If you try to heal your marriage or raise it from the dead, you are going to have to align yourself with the power of God. You are going to have to make sure you are aligned and let go of trying to get your spouse to do the same. And by aligned, I mean that you are very confident that God is pleased with how you are handling your side of everything. I will discuss at another time what to do when your spouse is not doing his or her part. Some of the steps a man can take to help heal his marriage. I think about the men I've been working with who are getting it right. These are very brave and dedicated men who are willing to discover their own shortcomings. If you are a man like me, the last thing you want is for someone to point out what you are doing wrong. So I hope that by describing typical characteristics of a man who wants to fix a marriage that he has damaged, you can find value in my writing without taking offense. With that said, here are a few basic pieces you are going to need. First, these men are patient with how long it takes for their women to recover from the pain that has been caused. The male brain is designed to move on and forget the past much better than a woman's. Many men think that women want to hold on to the past. The men who handle this correctly stop thinking they comprehend the mind of their women. They learn to be patient and have trust that the woman will heal and leave behind the past as fast as she can. Please note, there is no joy for her to remember painful events in the past. In fact, it hurts her more than it hurts you. Compassion is a much more useful response than frustration. It is selfish to make it all about your pain when the past is discussed, when it is time for her pain to be discussed and resolved. Second, these men read and ponder. They understand that seeing a therapist once or twice a week is insufficient. A well-used brain is like a well-used pencil. It needs to be sharpened every day. Also, repairing a broken marriage is a complicated process. It can't be done without a great deal of learning. A good therapist should be aware of many books that are fitting for you to read between visits. I recommend at least an hour a day when you are first getting started. Also, this is a good way to demonstrate your loyalty to your spouse. Resist the temptation to explain to her everything you are learning. She will know you are getting it based on how you treat her. Third, these men learn to behave well, whether she does or not. I hope that every woman who is recovering from different forms of abuse can maintain her dignity as she works to heal and recover. But sometimes, if you hold her head under water long enough, she will start to lash out. The men who fix their marriages do not use her response to pain as an excuse to misbehave again. Fourth, these men stop expecting the wife to meet their needs. If he wants her to recover as quickly as possible, she will need maximum energy. If she has to spend time thinking about what the man needs or dealing with his disappointment or frustration when she doesn't meet his needs, and yes, men, this does include bedroom activities, then it will take longer and could derail her healing. Gentlemen, remember how it feels when she asks you to fix the sink, then before you are done, she asks you to change the baby's diaper, then to take out the garbage. What would you say to her? Back off and give me some space, please? It is a great deal of work to recover from what you have done to her. Give her time and space. She will let you know when she is done. Fifth, these men are anxiously engaged in being of service to their wives. He works to improve his ability to predict her needs. A man is usually abusive in part because he has unfulfilled, unhealthy expectations of his woman and his marriage. In a healthy marriage, the man is more interested in how he can be of service to his woman than he is with what he is going to get in return. A healthy man becomes independently healthy on an emotional and psychological level before he meets and marries his woman, so he can find joy in spending the rest of his life working to meet her needs instead of getting emotionally spun when she doesn't meet his needs. What needs am I planning for my wife to meet for me when we get married? This backward paradigm has invaded our culture and is destroying marriages. I believe it was JFK who said, "Ask not what your country, wife, can do for you, but what you can do for your country, wife." Difference is broken? I remember observing some unfortunate social patterns in my study of the history of the world, including the time period of explorers first meeting the natives of North America. A really instructional song was written for the Disney cartoon movie Pocahontas, called Savages. It is a counterpoint that has the natives describing the explorers as savages because of their lifestyle, and the explorers identifying the natives as savages because of their lifestyle. In both cases, the different cultures were not validating the other because they had not yet taken the time to understand why they functioned the way they functioned. I remember hearing the phrase, "That which we don't understand is broken." Unfortunately, I see this pattern in the way men perceive and treat women, and sadly in the way women perceive and treat men at times as well. I hear about and see men having conversations with other men about women. Is your wife like this? Does she? How often does she? Sometimes these conversations can be edifying, but it is not uncommon that the conclusion of the conversation is, "Yeah, I know, that is really messed up. Doesn't make any sense at all." Similar conversations can also be found between women at times. I urge the reader to avoid all conversations that end with disrespect for the differences the opposite sex brings to each relationship that are yet to be explained in a meaningful and understandable way. As with most sciences, that which is not understood in one time period is often clarified as more knowledge is acquired. This is also the case in psychology. Very insightful books like John Gray's Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus is an excellent introduction to the valid differences between men and women. The hypersensitivity of women. Jacob 2:7. Your wives' feelings are exceedingly tender and chaste and delicate before God, which thing is pleasing unto God. I have had many men say things to me like, "She is too sensitive. She feels things too deeply. She cares too much about. She won't give it a rest. She can't just move on and forget about it. Her expectations are too high. Why can't you get her to lower her standards?" This disrespect and incomprehension of the gift women have for feeling things deeply was significantly undermined by Freud's concept of hysteria. It has been my observation that whenever a woman showed more feeling than Freud thought was appropriate for a situation, he would classify it as hysteria. Having been raised in a family of 9 boys, I myself have struggled with the different way that women experienced the world. To not only understand but validate this sensitivity, we need to go back to the proclamation on the family. Women are designed to be nurturers, while men are designed primarily to preside, provide, and protect. In order to nurture correctly, each woman must be aware of the quality of the environment where her children are raised. Historically, the safety and security of children was often threatened. In order to keep her family safe from outlying dangers, the mother needed to develop a sensitivity that is more alert than the 5 senses. I met with a man who has been in the military for most of his adult life. I tried to explain this concept to him when I received the following revelation. I asked him, Have you ever heard stories of soldiers, perhaps sitting around a campfire on the edge of a battle zone, when seemingly for no reason at all, one of the well-trained soldiers senses there is something wrong, that there is an imminent attack from the dark shadows? It was not a surprise that not only was the soldier in front of me aware of such stories, he took pride in this hypersensitivity of a good soldier. I went on to ask him, "Is it possible that your wife's hypersensitivity works the same way?" For another example that might help men to better understand this part of being a woman, consider the radar operator on a boat or in a submarine. More than one woman has described the brain function similar to the green stick that swings in a circle around the green screen. This difference, one woman said, is that the screen is in 4 dimensions. She was referring to the normal 3 dimensions combined with the dimension of time. If you are the captain of a ship, the patriarch of a family, would you want a radar operator that is more sensitive than you are? Would you find value in a crew member that could hear and see things even better than you can? There can be some frustrating elements to being a radar operator. Sometimes she can only sense that there is something out there. Imagine a captain saying to his radar operator, "If you can't give me any more specific detail than that, then we are going to proceed as if there is nothing there." Gentlemen, it is my recommendation that you help your boat stay afloat for longer by taking the radar operator seriously. Give her sensitivities validation. Help her to clarify what it is that is causing her concern instead of invalidating and or challenging her perspective just because you don't see it. The callousness of men. Similarly, and unfortunately, the callousness of men has been misunderstood and invalidated. He's just a thug. Don't ask him how he feels. It's just a waste of breath. It seems sometimes like men just don't care. There were several psychological and social revolutions going on between 1965 and 1995, and with all the revolutions, there can be overcorrections. Possibly one of the more obvious ones was disestablishmentarianism. If nothing else, that is just a fun word to say. A percentage of the people at the end of the 1960s were sick of feeling controlled by the government, so they wanted to boycott, quote, the establishment, unquote. If they had done so completely, the value of an organized society would have been lost. More psychosocially related is the change in the way children are treated. Before 50 years ago, it would have been considered bad parenting if you didn't give your kid a good whipping when needed for disciplinary purposes. I agree that there were too many parent-child dynamics back in the day that can be classified as abusive. Unfortunately, I have had more than one case in the last few years that the efforts made by government agencies has been so enthusiastic that the parent has experienced legal consequences just for such things as raising their voice and restricting phone privileges. In other words, in an effort to revolutionize the protection of children, in some cases, the parents have lost the authority to provide effective consequences for the children. Now let's look at how this pattern has affected our perspective of men and callousness. We will need to go back to the proclamation on the family. The proclamation refers to the 3 P's that men have been given primary stewardship over: preside, provide, and protect. Let's go back over the past several thousand years and observe what types of activities would be involved in fulfilling such stewardships. I describe this principle best in reverse order. Protect. For most of the history of the world, the activities involved in protecting one's wife, child, freedom, etc., has involved bloodshed. I've never been in a situation that has involved the real experience of bringing death to another living person, but in an attempt to be a responsible clinician, I have worked hard to imagine it. I imagine how detached I would have to get with my sensitive feelings if I were forced into a situation where someone was willing to kill my loved ones if I was not willing to kill him. This seems like an extreme scenario for us as modern men, but the Book of Mormon is full of stories that have this theme. Now imagine asking a typical young man, "How do you feel about running into that jungle full of booby traps and bullets?" Or, "How do you feel about being dumped on a beach where more than half of you and your friends are going to be slaughtered by machine guns?" Or, "How do you feel about swinging a sharp blade at someone while they swing a sharp blade at you until one of you is dead?" I cannot imagine what that must have been like for a mother to watch her young boy begin this military training as he came of age. Fathers and older brothers would play fighting games with ever-increasing intensity. The boy was taught to feel less and less. Get back up after being crashed to the ground. Kick him while he is down. Stop crying. We don't have time for tears. For thousands of years, if a man could not become callous, he would have failed at protecting his family. Ironically, when I ask mothers to describe what they like about their son on the first visit, an almost predictable first phrase is something like, "He is sensitive," or "He is kind." Mothers describe these characteristics as the highest badge of honor. In my head, I measure how much more work it is going to take for the young man to acquire a true warrior's mentality, the willingness to ignore his feelings in order to do whatever it takes to win his wars against Satan and protect himself and his loved ones from the heartless and ferocious attacks of Satan. See my other book, Like Dragons Did They Fight. This part of a man's stewardship, being able to spend long periods of time at war, has also affected the comfort zone men have around their living conditions. Men had to learn how to rest their minds while in the bloody and dirty trenches of World War I and II. They had to learn to sleep in the jungles of Vietnam. They had to go months, if not years, without showers or shelter during the Crusades. Now, most men are satisfied with very basic living conditions because at least it is better than a dirt-floored cave. At least we have running water. I hope we can appreciate the simplicity of men. The challenge is to learn how to synergize this capability with the constant drive women have to celestialize everything. See celestial orientation. Now, at this point, provide and preside haven't been written yet.